switching gears and then I'm gone. I'm looking good now. Trips to Italy, shows in Moscow. Here's what I'm gonna do. Hold up, salute to the brand new dudes without their crew, scraping up their tunes. Don't know what to do, just keep it cool. Leave food, keep it clean when they're just like the food. We just like you, trying to make it to round two. Here's what I'm gonna do. Hold up, salute to the brand new dudes without their crew, scraping up their tunes. Don't know what to do, just keep it cool. Leave food, keep it clean when they're just like the food. We just like you, trying to make it to round two.
What's going on, y'all? What's going on? It's your boy DameSmiff, and we are here with another episode of Musician Talks. And this episode is kind of interesting because we're going to be talking about how BTS, the K-pop group, has decided to announce that they're boycotting the upcoming Grammys, right? Now, it's an interesting topic for me because it gets to kind of deep dive into what the artists think about being validated for their work. But also we get to kind of see why something like this is or is not effective, right? Now, the reason that's going to be important to understand is because we then get to look at this from the perspective of what is it that we want from the music industry. So if you like conversations like this, make sure you hit the like button. That way more people can understand how cool this conversation is. And then also make sure you are subscribed so that way you can catch my latest live streams and all of the newest videos and things like that I come out with. So like I was saying, when it comes to the Grammys, there's a few different things that I think of, at least, you know, from my experience. And I think for a lot of it, it's that many artists don't agree with how the Grammys, I guess you can say, operates. And then on another hand, many artists probably don't understand how the Grammys operates, right? So we'll probably do another episode on like how award shows actually work from the different perspectives. But today we're going to focus on the actual protests to try to figure out, well, what is it that is being protested or, you know, pretty much protested, but boycotted. And we're going to try to figure out what is the consistent thing that is, I guess, the common denominator in these protests, right? So the first thing we really got to break down is kind of like, I guess you can say, a nutshell of the history of everything, right? And so when I think of, let's say, the Grammys, of course, I don't really think like, oh man, you want a Grammy, you're like so much better than what I thought you were. It's really more so, okay, you want a Grammy, you've earn the notoriety that your work deserves, you know? I guess that's what it really means to me. It's kind of like, okay, this is the pinnacle of like saying, okay, everybody's noticed you at least, you know, just at least noticed, right? So we can really look at this from a few different ways. And I want to try to focus today on, like I said, the protests, because the protests may or may not have a race element considering the consistencies with some of the protests, right? Now, when I decided to input this race element into it, it was more so a decision based on why these protests are usually announced, and then also what usually is the metric on which we judge music, right? Oddly enough, we don't judge music based on expertise. We don't judge music based on, let's say, values and things like that. It's usually something that goes along with identity. Most of the things that when people are actually like trying to figure out what they like and enjoy about the music usually comes with how they personally identify with things, right? So just to be fair, Black people listen to Black music, white people listen to white music, Asians listen to Asian music, right? Just in a nutshell. But then when you start to get to the different approaches of music and the appreciation for just, you know, the talents and skills within music, then you start to see more and more people get very diverse of all creeds, colors, and genders, right? So So for the most part, we have to really consider race when we are thinking about the actual judgment of artists, because it's a thing that many people actually use, right? So there's a thing with Eminem being a rapper. There's a thing with Asian people being introduced into the Western market. There's a thing with Latina and Latino musicians being introduced into the mainstream pop market. Reggaeton and all that and stuff like that, colorism within Afrobeat and stuff like that. So race plays a huge role in what we're talking about today, but it doesn't in the overarching award show conversation. So that's why we're going to separate it today. And we're going to use the recent example, like I said, of BTS protests to kind of create a vacuum on this today. So to understand why international superstars like BTS are taking a stand today, we first have to look back at how artists like Salt-N-Pepa and Public Enemy exposed the exact system nearly 40 years ago, okay? So 1979 to 1988, think about what was going on then, right? Hip hop grows into global commercial force. And the Grammys provide almost like no recognition for this at the time, right? So the following decade, you'll really see the Academy introduce best rap performance, but they won't play it on TV. And they'll introduce things like basically urban, and you'll see like different, vocabulary coming out and stuff like that. But by 1988, hip hop had proven its commercial power and cultural dominance. Under mounting pressure, though, the Recording Academy finally created the first ever Best Rap Performance category. And this was the 31st annual Grammy Awards. Weeks before the ceremony, though, the Academy informed the nominees that their category would not be included in the live television broadcast. The message was clear: hip-hop was useful for driving youth culture, but it was not deemed prestigious enough for the main stage. And what do we mean by the main stage? Well, when I say the main stage, if you ever hear me talking to you about it, it means in people's households. That means like right there in the living room where grandma and the kids can see, right? So if you ever think about what kind of music or movies or shows you want to create for people to watch, and you're like, man, my audience will love this, just keep that in mind on what that audience looks like, right? And it doesn't mean just race. It means like completely the entire identity of them. But instead of quietly accepting the award off camera, the nominees took action, and led by figures like Salt-N-Pepa, Public Enemy, Slick Rick, DJ Jazzy Jeff, and the Fresh Prince, Will Smith, as those of you who may know him today, the artists staged a historic boycott. Salt-N-Pepa directly exposed a financial double standard, pointing out that the Academy wanted the ratings and influence of rap culture without giving its creators equal television representation or prime time commercial visibility. This is something that, if you were to juxtapose it today, is the same as what Jay-Z tried to do with the Super Bowl as far as highlighting specific artists and things like that. It's a little bit of, a power play on, if you value something, then market it as such. Like you don't really see people hiding things that are great things, unless you're hiding them from threats, but simultaneously, Public Enemy's Chuck D framed the issue not as a minor scheduling dispute, but as institutional disrespect. By holding a joint press conference and skipping the ceremony entirely, oh, my bad here. Had to adjust some volumes real quick. By skipping the ceremony entirely, these artists demonstrated that segregated categories without equal visibility was an insult, not an honor. So what that really means is that they're starting to feel like there's a trend when you consider, this is in 1988, when you consider how jazz musicians were treated in America typically and things like that, alongside actors and things like that. So the race element there, it's kind of felt, right? We're not necessarily directly saying black musicians and white musicians need to be segregated, but typically hip hop musicians were majority black. So there is a bit of, parallel in the sentiments of why that was felt, right? Now, the other question that we need to figure out here is, why would the Grammys want to separate the, I guess you can say, hip hop from mainstream media? If I were to be objective and just to be honest, in 1988, there was actually more than likely an increase of, I guess you can say, consumption of hip hop, but also a decline in righteousness within the hip hop music. There weren't many places trying to actively promote in households, in the mainstream media, the kinds of topics and concepts that hip hop was tackling, until you got to like daytime television, or maybe you got to like the soap operas and like the horror movies and stuff like that. But when you think about an institution like what the Grammys represents, that's one thing. Compared to a record label or a film studio, that's a completely different thing, right? So what we were really probably looking at was archaic views of what society tradition or conventionally values, right? We would see people that would be under the impression that a top musician would also be of high morality or high character, high integrity, and things like that. But then when you're saying that the top sales or the highest consumed genre of music covers things like crime and violence and, degeneracy in certain angles, similar to rock music or similar to, any kind of like music of that vein, you can see why the Grammys would be hesitant to put that on mainstream television, considering the fact that they have to deal with the federal regulations and things like that that come with promoting things. So this is important to understand, though, objectively, because we recently talked about in another live stream how there was an Iranian band that was actually punished for protesting against the government, and they actually had gotten lashes and were also banned from doing anything creatively or musically for 2 years. So that's the band's version, the musician's version of, regulations and having to deal with the boundaries and stipulations of society and governmental law. It's very much reasonable to think that the Grammys were hesitant when considering things like Fuck the Police were out by NWA. There was a whole bunch of like drug music going on. Gangsta rap was probably just beginning to become popular and things like that. It wasn't just dance tracks the whole way through when people would say the name hip hop. Hip hop had a lot of different stigmas to it at the time. So it's very understandable why they wouldn't do that, right? But like I said, it's also equally as plausible to say, well, it's interesting that you would stop right here all the way up to getting all the accolades and the benefits and the notoriety of the awards and things like that, but you won't film it, right? It's just kind of dishonest. That's the thing, right? So why you chose to be dishonest there has led people to think that it's possibly racially motivated, right? So the 1989 boycott exposed a recurring strategy. And when a genre pioneered by marginalized communities and it becomes too big to ignore, the Academy creates a separate category, shielding the main pop categories from direct competition with those certain marginalized communities. So the reason why the thumbnail looks the way it does today, because in this example, it's black people with hip hop. I can be pretty sure we can find an example of this happening in Latin American music. But today's example is now about K-pop and Asian music, Asian pop culture. So this is the strategy that we're primarily noticing in this video, is that when certain niche identities start to get very big, the quote unquote pop bubble can't be popped. For some reason, you have to be separated from competing with everybody who can quote unquote fit within the pop genre. Now, I don't know what a pop genre is. That's going to be another video. So maybe I got like 2 more videos I need to work on. But when we're defining what pop is, you would think that means the word popular, right? Popular. So at the time in 1988, hip hop was popular. Right now, we would like to say it's hip hop, but it's probably a close second to K-pop, which in its name, popular, is one of the most, if not the most popular music next to probably Afrobeat. So when we say that, what are they really competing against, right? Are they competing against Drake? Is that what we're going to say? Is Drake pop or is he hip hop? Like all these ops and things like that. I don't know. So for decades, Spanish language music from dozens of distinct cultures was collapsed into a single Latin bucket. When Latin artists achieved massive global crossover success in the late 1990s, the Academy's response was not to integrate them into primary general field categories. Instead, they spun off an entirely separate institution called, guess it, the Latin Grammys. Now, here's where we gotta, again, be reasonable. The only reason this would work and exist and be a greenlit thing for the Grammys is because Latin people said yes. If Latin people said no, 2 things would have happened. You wouldn't have gotten any more recognition and it just would have moved over because it would have been too hard or too much work to actually appease you. Or you would have gotten recognized and had to compete with everybody else, right? So because they accepted this pretty much, I wouldn't say asked for it, but accepted it, there is now the Latin Grammys. So while presented as an expansion, media critics and artists recognize it as a mechanism to keep the primary Grammy ceremony focused on Anglo-American pop. So not Black American pop, not Asian American pop, not Latin American pop. I don't even know if you can split the Anglos down. You know, can you get into the Irish and the British and, you know, all that stuff too? But this brings us to the present day and the recent protests led by BTS. Over the past several years, BTS shattered Western chart records, sold out stadiums worldwide, and drove unprecedented global engagement. Yet when it came to the Grammys' primary awards, Album of the Year, Record of the Year, they were consistently bypassed. Now, when I think of BTS personally, a lot of what I know of them is very minimal because it's just not my style of music. So it would be interesting for me to just see the numbers just for what they are because I'm just not into the immersion of the scene, which probably would give me a better understanding. But because of that, that makes me wonder, well, why would they not be in for consideration? Because I have no bias. Like, I have no bias. So I'm just thinking, like, okay, if they prove the numbers, they prove the facts, they sold all the tickets, then go ahead and give it to them, right? I wouldn't feel that way if hip hop was in the same predicament. And for some reason, we're doing like millions and millions and millions and billions of streams and tickets and being sold, and hip hop's in the greatest place ever. I wouldn't be like, oh man, it really doesn't make sense why this is happening. It would completely make sense why we would be getting awards and stuff like that, right? So I don't understand where the separation part lies, right? And because I don't understand it, I can also then see why artists and many critics and things like that can jump to the conclusion of, oh, well, it's this, which would be race, or it's this, which could be money, or it could be this, which could be nepotism or relationships or networking or whatever it is, right? But why does the Recording Academy continue to rely on these racialized and regional boundaries? Well, first, it protects the traditional Western industry establishment that forms the core of the Academy's legacy voting body. Think about what I said there. It protects the traditional Western industry establishment that forms the core of the Academy's legacy voting body. So we're gonna, whenever we deep dive into the next video about how the Grammys actually works and like what it actually means to get a Grammy and things like that, we'll dive into how they vote for the different categories and things like that. But we do have to pay attention to that, right? This is where I gotta put my reasonable musician businessman hat on. The Recording Academy is a American recording academy that has been founded probably over 40, 50 years ago, right? So we now have to think about this in terms of what we're actually communicating with. right? And this is going to be a hard pill to swallow because I had to actually learn this too. But what you're communicating with is a certain organization, or I guess you can say governing body, which would be the Recording Academy. And this governing body has a standard, has an expectation, and has a palate. They have a certain taste of flavor and things that influence them and triggers, right? And so what you'll notice is that certain triggers work better than others. Now, as I say this and it sounds very vague, it makes sense, right? So now we're going to then apply race at some point to any of this conversation. So now if you have a white organization and the organization has a certain taste and certain influence, now this is where you can add more adjectives to the Anglo part. Like they're the color white, but let's say they are Northeastern acoustic music, more of the contemporary type of music lovers, right? And things like that. That's what this organization foundationally represents. Then they're going to have certain things in their palette that's going to be valuable to them or detest and be gross to them that they're not going to really appreciate, right? Let's give another example. They're the color white, but they're from the West Coast of the United States and they're a little bit more conservative. So their music seems to be a little bit more orchestral or avant-garde and very like specific. And I guess you can say, what's the word I'm looking for? Very niche music, right? It's very Californian or very artistically niche, right? Now, again, that comes with a certain flavor, a certain palette, and that organization, that governing body of people, if they were to judge your music, you would have to navigate that palette, right? So the things you put in your music may turn them off or may attract them to your music. Now, I'm going to add another element to this. I'm going to remove the color white or replace the color white, and then we're going to put, let's say, black. Okay, black organization, and they are from the southeast of the United States. That's like Florida, a little bit of Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, the Carolinas, stuff like that, right? Well, down there, perhaps they have a bit more of a mix between conservative and modern music tastes. So the mix down there can go between party style dance music, whether it's, Southern soul, R&B music, upbeat hip hop and things like that, all the way down to the gospel hymns. There are certain triggers in that palette that is going to make the music that you present to them valuable or turn them off. So now that I've presented that, right, and I had to learn this in college, when I learned that, I then realized, oh, this is why record labels have, I guess you can say, an imprint, a kind of flavor to them, right? Blue Note Records, RCA Records, if you want to go even smaller, TDE, Dreamville, these different record labels and stuff like that, they have a certain shape to them, right? And they belong in a certain area. Now, why they belong there doesn't really matter about the skin color. It's not about race. It's more so the approach to the music, right? But the issue that we're starting to notice is that certain races foundationally are attracted, just I guess you can say culturally, not foundationally, are culturally attracted to certain kinds of music. So if you pick gospel music, Black gospel, Asian gospel, you can have Indian gospel, you can have African gospel, all of these different kinds of colors of gospel will have the trigger points within that palette of music that either would be enjoyable or a turn off to that collective of gospel music fans, right? No matter the color. So now, to put this in full circle, when you look at the Recording Academy, what it was founded upon was generally not what you are seeing happen in 1988 in a pop culture setting, which would have been hip hop at the time. It wasn't founded on that. So then for them to try and impose that as part of what they represent would not make sense, right? That's a conversation I'm pretty sure that in the meeting room wasn't easy to have in terms of maybe we should put this on TV or maybe we should not, right? Because there's a certain representation of the palette that they found it on that has to be maintained. So this is another conversation that we can then have about how you navigate that as a musician, like how you actually create songs for this. But again, that's going to be another video. But when we actually apply that logic that, okay, the Recording Academy is founded by Western, more than likely conventional United States ideals and palettes and things like that as far as musical tastes, then we can see why we see the patterns we see from, let's say, Latin music being separated, hip hop being separated. I don't know if it happened with rock, but generally the idea of pop has a shape, right? So it begs the question, again, for me at least, why you would make a Latin Grammys if the Grammys is supposed to represent everything. But then it also kind of highlights why you'll see people having the same discrepancies with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame doesn't only represent the genre of music, rock and roll. So the things that these organizations and these things are founded upon today are a bit confusing. So there may be a need for an upgrade or a change or a shift in the conversation as far as what these things actually represent today. Totally another video I can do for you. But the point here is that, so now that we understand that, now that we see what this organization generally represents, right? Now we can actually navigate it for what it is instead of, just saying, see, this is why they're protesting. This is the problem that they are. So now we can say, okay, as artists, if we want these accolades and these rewards and we want to be represented, then we got to know who we're being represented by or who's doing the validation, really. Okay. So that's my spiel for the day, and let's get to the first clip and let's actually get started looking at this BTS protest for next year's Grammys, and let's actually understand it a bit better.
BTS just did something no artist at their level has ever done before. On July 29th, 2026, all 7 members, RM, Jin, Suga, J-Hope, Jimin, V, and Jungkook, posted the same message on Instagram within...
Okay. Their names are pretty funny because I don't know any of them. So if you're a BTS fan, please go wild in the comments and like flame me for being like a novice at this, because this is funny. But I'm basically going to learn about the group in real time in front of you, right? I've heard such little music from them because as an artist myself, I try to like insulate myself into my own process. But in terms of like understanding who the people are, who the artists are and stuff like that, I don't know that stuff because that's usually the part that I say where the fans value that more. Like I really appreciate the music part. So I've really been looking at their like production, their tour schedule and stuff like that, like how they make the visuals and the photos and the outfits and stuff. For fans, you probably want to know like these people's names and like who they are and the type of foods they eat for lunch and stuff like that, right? But the funny part that I wanted to highlight though was that I just learned that one of their names is Suga. That's a fire solo artist name. So if you do go solo, you're the guy that should go solo. Suga, that's fire.
...minutes of each other. No press conference, no label statement first. Just 7 guys saying the same thing at the same time.
Okay, and this is something too I think we should stop doing. Instagram story announcements. I think we should do like official press releases because this is not, I don't know, in my opinion, an official channel of communication. This could have been like a drunk tweet. This could have been like a funny prank. This could have been anything that we just going to take back because it's Instagram, right? I feel like this should have just been like a literal splash page on their website. Not an Instagram story or a little post, I guess, if you're going to make it a big deal. But it says, we have decided not to submit to the Grammys this year. We hope that music can be heard and loved for what it is rather than being divided by region or language. Thank you always to Army, I hope that's what they're called, and everyone who has stayed with us. So the key thing that I want to highlight here is that their agenda for the protest is that they don't want their music to be divided by region or language. Now, that's actually on one hand very noble because it's like the biggest group ever to kind of stand up to say, hey, we also want to compete with everybody else. But then it also begs the question, like I'm saying here, is that should they try to target the Western market this way? right? And what hip hop was able to figure out in some weird cosmic way was that if you stopped being so raw and authentic with your artistry and stuff like that, you can still get the position, right? So you see a lot of hip hop acts in the Grammys, but you see them not as talented, right? And that really just comes down to the fact that they've learned what these things that I call triggers for the Grammys or the Recording Academy's palette actually works. And the part that most people hate, and this is what I call feeding the beast, is that they hate the fact that the negative sides of hip hop actually garner more attention than the positive, righteous side. So this is my point about this message that BTS is putting out to their fans. Do you want to give the beast what it wants to eat, or provide a nutritious meal? Because at the end of the day, if you try to get into the Grammys will still be the Grammys, and 9 times out of 10, you will still be what they think you are. So, do you want to be there, right? And that's kind of the argument most artists are going to have, because being there, which is why they're pointing out what they're pointing out, means a lot. It is a good thing to get a Grammy. But it also was very noble of them to say, you know what, we're not going to take the opportunity to compete for a Grammy because of this reason. So I really don't know where I would sit with this, because I don't understand their individual agenda as a group. I don't know if you guys just want to take over the planet as BTS, or if you guys really want to be like super noble, poor righteous teachers.
They are not submitting their music for the 2027 Grammy Awards, not skipping the show, not scheduling conflicts, a full withdrawal from consideration for an award show they have chased for almost a decade. So what actually happened here? Let's break it down. The message itself was short, but it hit hard. Each member posted a version of the same line. They've decided not to submit to this year's Grammys because they want music to be heard and loved for what it is.
And the message, though she just repeated it, we know what it is. Now that I'm thinking about it, them doing it all at once at the same time makes me think that, yes, there was a big conversation about this, and I'm sure the whole team is on the same page. But it doesn't really clarify why. Like, why suddenly now did you want to do this if we, as I've just shown you guys, since the 80s, have known the Grammys to have this kind of like strategy of like kind of categorizing and segregating a lot of the genres. So the reason I'm asking it this way is to try to be an objective, person here. I'm trying to figure out, okay, if I was a massive K-pop group and I was killing it, and I'm about to go in Grammys, and I know I'm about to kill my category, even if they segregate me from Taylor Swift and Drake. Why is this important today? Like, what happened between 3, 4, 5 years ago and now to where things are different? My guess is, and this is my personal opinion, is that someone got in their ear and made it to where if you get separated, and I don't know, someone could be, an investor, it could be the fans, it can be, maybe a member, an executive or whatever. But if you were to do this, this is either going to be something that we can use as foundation to levitate another project we have coming down the pipeline. Like, it'll garner attention. The Grammys is coming. BTS protested. Coverage. DameSmiff is talking about it. Amazing. Right? Or someone got in their ear and told them that if you don't boycott the Grammys, I feel like you're XYZ, and they have some negative stigma that may affect sales or tickets and things like that, right? Now, the reason I have to lay it out that way is because I can just pick one of the options and just say, oh yeah, that's what it is based on my personal anecdotal experience. But from the little bit I've learned about K-pop stars, there is a way deeper relationship that they have with their fans than it is just music. So it's very possible that this is more of a political thing than a musical thing. Like, they're trying to tell us, like, oh, we want you to love the music through the language. But it's like, I don't think that's a problem for you guys. Seeing how many people around the world love your music, I don't think the language barrier is the problem here. I think what it is that the Grammys has a flavor. You're a different flavor, so they're gonna separate you, that of which, like I said, we've seen before. And if you've been trying to get on the Grammys, hopefully you've studied the Grammys to know that that's what they do. But it begs the question is, do you want them to now be tasting the flavor that you want and putting you on TV more, which is then going to do what happened to hip hop, which is they're going to highlight just the things they like. They're not going to take what you're creatively putting out as whole. So just keep that in mind. All right. So do you want that, or do you not care at all? Like this whole Grammy pursuit was just like a side quest. You know, what does this really mean for you? So that's the part I'm asking, because I'm not immersed in the BTS scene. But if I was interviewing them right now, that's the question I would be asking them individually. That 7-part message that you guys put out doesn't answer any of these questions that I'm asking you guys.
Not divided up by region or language. They thanked ARMY for staying with them through it. That's it. No accusations, no names, but everyone knew exactly what they were responding to. A little over a month before this, the Recording Academy had announced 5 new Grammy categories, including one called Best Asian Pop Music Performance, meant to recognize K-pop, J-pop, C-pop, and other Asian language pop music. On paper, that sounds like recognition. In practice, a huge number of fans read it as something else entirely.
Okay, this is just a video responding, but we're going to assume that it's accurate just for the sake of the conversation. But this could change, right? But if a huge number of fans felt that way, then that's the political side of of what I'm talking about here. They don't need to listen to the fans on this instance if their goal was to get to the Grammys. And that's the part that I talk about you guys a lot, saying that artists need to stop trying to relate the fans. But yeah, if the fans feel like they're going to do that and you're not going to boycott the Grammys, it's possible that BTS felt like their fans were going to boycott them.
A way to reroute BTS and other Asian artists away from the categories that actually matter: Album of the Year, Record of the Year, Best Pop Duo Group Performance, and into a side category instead. To understand why this stings, you have to understand BTS's Grammy history. 5 nominations, 0 wins. Every single time, they've watched the trophy go to someone else, most famously to Lady Gaga and Ariana Grande in 2021. A loss so controversial that fans started the hashtag Scammies, and it trended worldwide. They've performed at the Grammys, they've presented awards, they packed arenas and topped the Billboard 200 with albums almost entirely in Korean. Their newest album, Ari Wrong, released back in March, debuted at #1 in 23 countries. Weeks before the boycott, they walked away from the American Music Awards with Artist of the Year and 2 more trophies. By every commercial measure, this was supposed to be their year. And then a new category shows up that looks, to a lot of people, less like a door opening and more like a door being quietly closed. There's also something RM said months earlier in an interview with GQ that's getting reshared everywhere right now. He made clear the group isn't chasing the Grammys out of desperation and isn't interested in constantly saying out loud that they want to win one. To a lot of fans, this boycott feels like the natural next chapter of that mindset, not a sudden reaction. Here's where it gets interesting. Their own agency, HYBE, didn't fully back the move in the way you'd expect. HYBE released a statement making clear this is not a boycott at the company level, meaning if other HYBE artists want to submit for Grammy consideration, they're free to do so.
Okay, whoa, boom, wait a minute. That changes things a little bit. So, okay. BTS, what are y'all doing? 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 So are y'all boycotting the Grammys because y'all feel like being into this Asian pop category is closing the door to compete with the white pop category? Or are y'all doing this because you're nervous that your fans feel like that Asian category is separating y'all from because on one hand, y'all are boycotting the Grammys, but then in another hand, you're saying we're not chasing the Grammys out of desperation. Like that, it's not making you save face. It's like either you want the Grammy or you don't want the Grammy. But the thing that I think we need to really address is that what it takes to get a Grammy is not really set by us or the fans. Which is why the record label is saying like, okay, whoa, BTS can go ahead and not submit, but y'all go ahead and submit because we kind of want them Grammys on these resumes. So company-wide, we're not boycotting. It's just them. And this is why I said it's interesting because they need to have these questions answered because the 7 members did it. And the general sentiment is that the brand is boycotting the Grammys. You see what I'm saying? Like the umbrella BTS.
Business as usual. At the same time, HYBE didn't distance itself from BTS's reasoning either. The agency acknowledged it's hard to accept a new category shakeup right when BTS looked like one of their strongest contenders yet for the major awards. So what you have is a strange middle ground. The members made a personal, unified stand, and the company is staying carefully neutral, neither fully behind it nor against it.
And that's going to be a problem because, like what happened with the Latin Grammys, if you have them give you the Asian pop category, that means your resume has an Asian pop Grammy, not a Grammy. And so that's why they want this to be an open, like free across the board, equal competition, because saying you've beat out all the people in the Western market is amazing. But the fact that you're making it just that we only beat the other Asian pop stars is not true. But there's also kind of like not acknowledging the fact that we did beat everybody else.
This isn't happening in a vacuum. For years now, fans have accused the Grammys of quietly boxing out K-pop, nominating groups like BTS and Stray Kids in early rounds, then leaving them off final ballots entirely. Every year, the same complaint resurfaces. The show isn't ready to treat these artists as real contenders in the categories that count.
Now, I don't know why that is, because when I learned about K-pop, I was like, I never heard of it. But when I learned about it, I was like, oh, this is like high-level musicianship, dancing, music, singing. It's not bad singing. It's not bad dancing. Very theatrical shows, like well-thought-out shows. Compared to a rap show today where a dude's sitting with a mic and like two ugly girls twerking, like, think about that for a second. Like, why are they not being treated with high level of respect like you would see like an orchestral musician? Like, why are they not being treated that way? Is it because they're Asian? Is that the case? I don't know, but it's very easy to say that if we know the organization to have a certain taste, a certain palate.
Now add a brand new Asian pop category into that history, and you can see why so many people don't read it as progress. Some fans and commentators have gone as far as calling it a new kind of ceiling, a polite way of saying, you belong over here, not over there. Not everyone agrees, though. Defenders point out the Grammys already have region-specific categories for other genres, Latin jazz, tropical Latin, African music, and argue this is just the industry finally doing the same for Asian pop. To them, BTS turning it down looks less like standing against exclusion and more like turning down a genuine seat at the table. That tension, is this recognition, or is this a new box to get put in?
And this is the common problem artists are going to have with music business. As musicians, we know BTS is killing it. We know they're good and they can stand up against almost anybody on stage. We know that. But in business, it's got to be separate. It's got to be segregated to the point to where people know what they're looking at. Because if you were to tell people, and this is the part that really frustrates artists, if you tell people go to the grocery store and get me a loaf of wheat bread, and they were to ask you, well, what brand, which is in this example the parallel to race, then you would be standing there all day trying to figure out what's the perfect brand of wheat bread until you land on the one you like. You're not going to pick the best one because it's got the best nutrients and the best service and all that stuff. You're going to land on the one that's convenient. You're going to land on the one that's cutest. It's got the best packaging. It tastes the best. Very, very simple trigger things in your palate, right? So what they're trying to really explain to them, the defenders of the Grammys at least, is to say, listen, you need to get on the shelf of the grocery store. You need to not be the best. You need to get on the shelf of the grocery store. Now, that's a conversation with the music business, because musicians don't necessarily need to be great to compete, but they do need to be musicians. So that's the tough part about a lot of this conversation, is that you want these guys to kind of like dim their light to sit next to people that they're clearly better than. But if we point that out, that also means that this whole "I love you because you're good at what you do" conversation is not a conversation anymore. It's about "I love you because you make the most money. I love you because you're the most consistent. You're the hardest working. You give me what I ask for." Very transactional. And so they're challenging that. BTS is directly challenging that by saying, okay, we're not just going to say we're good and we're not going to get an award for it. We're just going to be good.
Is exactly what's fueling the debate right now, online and in the press. Fan reaction has been loud and mostly united behind the group. A common feeling among longtime fans, the new category feels less like a genuine celebration of Asian pop and more like a way to keep BTS out of the categories where they've always belonged. Many are pointing out that BTS's music has connected with millions of listeners who don't even speak Korean. Proof, they argue, that good music was never a language problem to begin with. Not every reaction is sympathy either. Some fans are frustrated, worried this move costs the group a shot they've waited years for. Others see it as BTS finally doing what they've hinted at for a while, refusing to keep begging an institution that's shut them out 5 times already. Whatever side you land on, one thing is clear. This wasn't a random move. It's the result of years of nominations that went nowhere, a brand new category that landed at exactly the wrong moment, and a group that has apparently decided they'd rather set the terms themselves than wait to be picked.
And so when I think of this, I think it's a interesting take on it. But the only thing, and I think this is the only thing that's going to solve their problem, is if we all can collectively, investors, fans, and musicians, if we all can collectively say, what does a Grammy mean to us? Then I think we can figure out whether or not this is going to be a good decision for them or not. But let's get into the next video where we can kind of take a sneak peek into another perspective of this. And it's really going to be from how one of the greatest musicians on planet Earth had to deal with the Grammys.
Vibrating. In Japan, ticket demand tripled stadium capacities. In Europe, shows sold out in minutes. Michael wasn't just the biggest artist in the world, he was the biggest show on Earth. With all this momentum, the industry consensus was simple. The Grammys were supposed to reflect the year's impact. And if Album of the Year meant the record that defined the culture, then Bad seemed untouchable. But the Recording Academy in the late 1980s wasn't just judging sound. Rumors began circulating that voters had grown wary of pop megastars. Some insiders claim the Academy didn't want a repeat of 1984, when MJ swept nearly everything in sight.
Whoa, wait a minute. So remember this palette conversation I keep bringing up? The things that Michael Jackson was doing, if you weren't there for them, I unfortunately wasn't able to see Michael Jackson live, but I was there when he was actually putting out albums. So I got to hear a lot of the music. But when you're thinking about what we just heard, they said they were growing weary of pop stars because we didn't want what happened in 1984 where Michael Jackson swept all the awards. Okay. Do you see why they're separating the music now? Because if you have an instance where you have Michael Jackson, where no one can define his music other than his name, the people who love his music are going to undeniably vote for his music because of the palette, right? But then if Michael Jackson was an Asian man, then do you see how it would look if an Asian man swept the Grammys in 1984? So the question here that most people are going to immediately and assumably make is that, well, if he was Asian and he swept the Grammys, what's wrong with that, right? Why is that bad? Well, it's not necessarily bad, but it does set a precedent to say that we are clearly not, I guess you can say, criticizing music to a point to where we can look at somebody we like and then have, I guess you can say, negative criticism. Because the reason people were voting for Michael Jackson cannot, personally, based on what I've learned about Michael Jackson, it cannot be only music. Because he was doing things creatively and I guess you can say just through philanthropy and things like that, that people just They couldn't let go of this guy. Like, he could stand on stage and they would scream for 3, 4, 5 minutes, right? So when you are considering that kind of influence, you can't really have an award show. You're basically having the Michael Jackson award show. So in order to avoid that, they've started to separate things to say, okay, Michael Jackson made an R&B song. That's not going to be pop. Like, we know, as much as we all love this song to be a Michael Jackson song, we can't just put this in pop because it's going to destroy no one's going to vote anything else. So we're going to put this in the R&B category. Okay, Michael Jackson did a record with Chris Tucker, and it's funky in a little bit. So let's call this more like modern pop. Let's call this modern urban pop, because it's got like a hip hop flavor to it. Because if we just put this back in pop, that's 2 awards for Michael, because he's already got the pop hit on the radio. That we can't just keep giving, So this is where I have to put on my reasonable businessman hat and say, okay, I can see why they're trying to actually spread the love to give more artists a chance here to get an Grammy. But then at the same time, I can also see the problem they have in front of them, where clearly we all just like Michael Jackson. Just give him all the Grammys, right? We just like Michael. But we can't do that, right? It doesn't make an award show. So now the problem that they're facing with, which then happened 4 years later in 1988 with Salt-N-Pepa and Public Enemy, is that, well, if we do this with things based on, let's say, hip hop, which is kind of like a variable genre, or if you use rock, then you get into indie rock, alternative rock, classical rock, and you get all these different, like, little subgenres. You start to separate artists, and the data is going to show you from our palettes why they're being separated. Now, if you're going to say all of hip hop, we're going to buy all of this music, but we're not going to fit into the pop categories, we're just going to fit into the hip hop category, then they compete with themselves, which then makes the competition a bit more fierce for hip hop to compete, because they're not competing with something that would just outright lose if you were to compete with hip hop. Like, you wouldn't be able to compete with Michael Jackson if you made a jazz album and you had to compete in the same category of best album of the year. You just wouldn't do it. Like, you could try, you just wouldn't win, right? But you can win best jazz album if you competed with jazz. Jazz wasn't the type of album that Michael made at the time. So that's why they're doing it. But then if you consider the BTS protest, this is making us assume that it's doing this out of some kind of nefarious, evil, we don't like what you represent type of, I guess you can say, perspective. And so learning that this is why they stopped Michael Jackson from sweeping the Grammys does help us understand why they are then going, oh snap, BTS might just sweep the Grammys. Like, because if we think about, who's actually going to be voting and what they're voting on, if it's really going to be based on facts, stats, and numbers, then this is what they're basing it on. But does BTS know that? Do the fans know that? Because Michael Jackson is before a lot of people's time currently. Like, he's unfortunately old now. So if we didn't know that, would we be telling BTS to boycott the Grammys, knowing that this is A, how the Grammys works, but B, it would then make the competition for them actually work for them? Now, on top of us knowing that, we also then have to say, well, then if they get an Asian pop Grammy, is that any less or equal to a mainstream pop Grammy? And that's really the I guess you can say, contention with this problem with most artists, is that they don't want to be considered an Asian Grammy award winning artist. They just want to be a Grammy award winning artist, like Michael Jackson was when he swept the Grammys.
And that quiet resistance, real or imagined, was about to shape everything that happened next. To understand why Bad lost Album of the Year, you have to look at the Grammys of the late 1980s, a system that didn't operate the way fans imagined. Back then, the Recording Academy was dominated by older, rock-leaning voters who often valued serious albums over commercially massive pop records.
Okay, and this is the palette portion that I was talking about. Rock. That was the mainstream taste and flavor of America at the time. Just under that was pop music. It was like, dance music, electronic music, house music, and hip hop. Just under that. But generally, when most people got in their car, they were listening to rock music. Black, white, Asian, male, female. It was rock music, right? Hip hop was growing in sales because it was just like the new, trendy, interesting thing. But we kind of were solidified by this point in the 80s to be a rock and jazz country.
No matter how revolutionary they were, charts didn't sway them, sales didn't impress them, influence alone wasn't enough. And this is where the shift really begins. After Thriller completely swept the 1984 Grammys, some insiders said the Academy became cautious about ever letting one artist dominate like that again. It wasn't a written rule, but critics at the time noticed a change. Voters were looking to spread recognition, not repeat history. Speculation, but widely discussed by journalists in the late 1980s. Meanwhile, U2's The Joshua Tree had exploded with critical acclaim. It was powerful, political, rock-driven, exactly the kind of project the Academy historically gravitated towards. Reviewers called it serious, timeless, and artistically significant, labels the Academy had always rewarded. Michael's problem wasn't quality. Bad was a polished, innovative pop machine. His challenge was perception. The Academy still saw him as the face of mainstream megapop, a category they rarely crowned as Album of the Year. Quincy Jones would later mention publicly that Grammy voting had deep political undercurrents, hinting that popularity could actually work against an artist in certain categories. And he wasn't wrong. The 1980s Grammys had a track record of choosing prestige over impact. So even before the ceremony began, the atmosphere was shifting. The votes weren't just about music. They were about image, identity.
Prestige over impact. What does that mean to you guys in the comments? What do you think that means? Like, for a lot of times when we see these new artists and they come up with these issues, at least for me, it proves that they just don't understand the music business.
And the Academy's idea of serious artistry. And that quiet internal bias was about to collide headfirst with the biggest star in the world. As Bad dominated the world, something else was happening. Something quieter, harder to measure, but powerful enough to influence a vote. By late 1987, the media narrative around Michael Jackson had begun to shift. Instead of focusing on his music, tabloids were building an entirely different story, the eccentric superstar. Headlines obsessed over his appearance, his lifestyle, and every minor rumor they could twist into a spectacle. This constant noise created what industry writers called Jackson fatigue. Not among fans, but among critics and insiders who were growing numb to the idea of Michael winning everything again.
Kind of like black fatigue.
And the Grammy voters, many of whom paid close attention to press cycles, weren't immune to it. Some journalists at the time claimed that the Academy had started gravitating towards artists who fit a more authentic or serious mold, distancing themselves from highly commercial acts. Others whispered that voters didn't want to appear like they were handing the industry's highest honor to a global phenomenon, rather than a critical darling.
So that right there could be one of the things that BTS is facing, is that they are very polished, very well executed musicians. They can sing and dance and do, a lot of great things. For a lot of people, this whole I want to relate to my favorite artist thing, that's unrelatable. That makes you seem untouchable, distant, or even like undeserving of this kind of award, because they'd rather give it to the young acoustic guitar playing solo artists that kind of climb their way out the bottom, or the rapper who wrote all his rhymes and really lived the life he wrote and stuff like that. The country artist who's got the experience of a rugged man who tells his tale. Like, these things are kind of what in people's heads are attractive. So they're not really thinking like, okay, the artist who's invested in themselves for a decade, like BTS did, or Michael Jackson, or many artists who's actually got a polished show, a polished act, a good team, executed strategy. You're not getting awarded. You're good. Like, why we got to help you with awards? Why do you need a Grammy? And so some people see it that way, which is why I beg the question, what is a Grammy to you? Like, as a fan, like if you see an artist and they go Grammy award winning singer, do you go, man, I have to listen to this album now? Or do you go, okay, they got a Grammy. Is the music good? I don't know how you view it. And until we get like a collective understanding of that, a lot of these protests are going to fall flat because there's just a misunderstanding of agendas between us as fans, musicians, and what the Academy actually represents in terms of taste.
This, however, is just a speculation. U2's image fit the moment. Political, gritty, guitar-driven. Michael, by contrast, was so massive that even his success worked against him. He wasn't just a musician, he was a cultural event. And to some voters, that scale felt intimidating, even polarizing. Behind closed doors, the sentiment grew that the award should go to someone fresh, someone serious, someone who wasn't dominating every chart and headline. Music journalists later pointed out that this era marked the beginning of a long-running Grammy trend, undervaluing pop giants while rewarding rock and alternative acts. Whether this shift was intentional or subconscious, it created the perfect storm. Michael's commercial power wasn't seen as genius, it was seen as excess. And that attitude set the stage for what happened when the envelopes were finally opened.
When Michael Jackson arrived at the 30th Annual Grammy Awards on March 2, 1988, expectations weren't high. They were absolute. The badges, the press, the critics, the fans outside the venue, everyone assumed he would repeat the dominance he showed just 4 years earlier. Bad had 6 major nominations. Album of the Year felt guaranteed. But when the show started, something immediately felt off. Category after category passed by, and Michael's name wasn't being called. Best Pop Vocal? Lost. Record of the Year? Lost. Song categories? Lost. Even categories where he'd historically been unstoppable, gone. The room felt the tension. Reporters started whispering. Quincy Jones, sitting in the audience, looked visibly irritated as the night went on. The cameras didn't catch him often, but those who were there said you could read the frustration on his face without a single word spoken. Then came Album of the Year, the moment the entire industry had been waiting for. When the envelope opened and The Joshua Tree by U2 was announced, the shock wasn't subtle. It rippled through the venue like a cold wave. This wasn't just a surprising loss, it was the night's defining upset. Michael Jackson, the most successful artist on Earth, had been almost completely shut out. In total, Bad won one single award in a major category: Best Engineered Recording, Non-Classical, an achievement.
Best engineered recording non-classical, because there's a best engineered recording classical category. But do you see how like this leads to a lot of assumption as to why it was politicized? But there's so many more questions that need to be answered, like who was on the panel, who voted, what influenced the votes, a lot of electoral type of questions that would need to be answered to bring clarity for us to actually make an accurate judgment of what we're looking at here. But yes, it would seem like people were intimidated by the success of Michael and then didn't want to see the champion reign, and they had control. But then at the same time, they probably were trying to set a precedent by making an example out of somebody who was successful, which in turn tarnishes the very integrity of the award show in general.
Achievement for the technical team, not Michael himself. For an album that shattered worldwide records, it was the kind of result that made people question what was really happening inside the Academy. Critics the next morning didn't hold back. Newspapers called it a stunning snub, an industry statement, even a course correction from voters who wanted to prove they weren't controlled by commercial success. But inside Michael's camp, the mood was heavier. Because despite the applause, the cameras, and the polite smiles, everyone who worked on Bad knew the same thing. This wasn't just a loss, this was a message. And the impact of that message would follow Michael long after the lights faded and the crowds went home.
So a lot of people, when they consider a Grammy, like I said, what does it really mean to you as a fan? Like when I seen that story, for me, it makes me think, well, damn, why did he value the Grammy so much to where it affected him so intensely? But that's the reality of being a musician, is that you can't really place those types of things on you. Like sometimes that is just the case, that you are actually enthralled by the idea of success through this kind of validation. And for some artists, it's the fans cheering. For other people, it's record sales. And for Michael, at least for his team at that time, it was getting album of the year. And so since they couldn't do that, it started to kind of make them question, like, what is it that we're really doing here, right? Like, what is this thing that we're building here that's supposed to become something, right? And that can, how we can get this next clip to work, and it's not loading up for me. Let's give it a moment. It should work in a moment here. But how are you guys feeling here in the chat about the Grammys? Is the Grammys something here that makes you really consider who you listen to, who you support, or is the Grammys just something separate that you think the artist should care about and it's just something for them? Because if that's the case, then it's problematic now, because we have your appreciation and influence being affected by an artist's effort, which is being guided by the validation of an award. So if we think that that award is separate from how we appreciate the artist today, then the artist is chasing something that's not real. They're chasing something that they just made up in their head, which then could lead into, very depressing decision-making opportunities. So we want to make sure things like that are, not only avoided, but very, very clear. But let's get into our last clip here. I finally got it working for you guys.
K-pop didn't become a global phenomenon by accident. It's not just catchy songs and synchronized dance moves. It's one of the most well-planned cultural exports in modern history. Behind every lightstick, music video, and world tour lies a billion-dollar strategy, one that targets Japan, America, and China differently, turning pop music into a tool of cultural domination. Today, we're breaking down exactly how K-pop conquered the world's biggest markets, and why it's more of a global business model than just an art form. Let's start with Japan. The first and most reliable foreign market for K-pop, Japan has always been a goldmine for Korean entertainment companies. And for one simple reason: Japanese fans buy. While the West shifted to streaming, Japan still values physical sales, limited edition albums, photo cards, fan sign events. These are cultural currency.
Okay, that's actually a great thing to highlight here. So this video is going to break down why K-pop works and is so successful in their industry, right? We spent a good about 2 months or so here on this channel breaking down like how artists make money on the road and things like that. And it was a lot of it was that there's a bit of a lifestyle brand that comes with being a musician today. So you got to kind of have people live the lifestyle that immerses them within your music and your art and things like that. So in Japan, if I were to guess with a little bit of information I learned from them, right, that the ability to meet your favorite artist, to, wear the clothes, to talk the language, to have connections with other fans, bridges the gap that many, I guess you can say, acts here in America can't bridge. Like, we can't get the type of, I guess you can say, energy that K-pop, J-pop, and C-pop fans have for their artists, because that's not a part of the culture as far as how we consume music here. So when we think about that, and then add in what we just learned about the Michael Jackson Grammy incident and how influential his music was and how within and woven into lifestyles his music was, it begs the question as to like how the Grammys is supposed to navigate something like this when their palette is set a certain way, right? So to answer that, we already have it's segregation. They basically just wind up segregating all the categories: classical, non-classical, Asian, Latin, jazz, Afrobeat, and all that stuff, right? But this is something that we need to understand, because here in America, a lot of the times when we think of an artist, and it's funny how they explain that in the Michael Jackson video, a lot of the artists we think of are just some grassroots dude who just wandered into success. There's no actual strategy to this, no actual logistics that goes into getting an artist built up to that shiny polished thing that we hit download or stream onto our phone, right? Like, you can find me and download my music and stream my music, but to compare me to, let's say, a BTS would mean that I'd have to do way much more strategizing to get A, more people to do that, but B, to just guarantee you would do that, right? And even BTS would have to do that because there's, differences in their fan base and how they actually market and navigate these things. So a way that I could do that is to do meet and greets. Streams like this are ways for people to find me, having realistic conversations with people in real life and stuff like that. That actual connection to people, right? That's how that works. So as we're looking at this, I just want you to keep that in mind with how you enjoy music and then how you want to enjoy music, but then consider how the Grammys reacts to people who are successful at implementing these strategies. Just keep that in mind.
K-pop labels figured this out early. Groups like TVXQ, Kara, and Girls' Generation tailored Japanese albums learned the language and built loyal fan bases that lasted decades. Even today, Japan contributes a massive chunk of revenue to companies like SM and HYBE. BTS's Japanese releases, for example, sell millions of copies without heavy local promotion.
Millions of copies without heavy local promotion. It says BTS, the unknown Korean group, this is probably old, made biggest stars on earth in no time, have now announced their first hiatus while releasing the major compilation album Proof. And so a year has passed since we last updated the sales and streams of the biggest boy band in the world, BTS. How much have they increased? We'll find out shortly. So it shows here, I guess, their different album sales and in millions. And so they get into like the 14 millions when they get to, I don't even know what this album is. I can't even pronounce that. But they're getting like millions of sales in their albums. And this is back in the day. So with all this success that they're getting from their music, why would they turn down the Grammys next year? And this is an old data set, so I would only assume it's either maintained or gotten a little bit better. Why would they turn down the Grammys if their goal was not to get a Grammy? And somebody said in the chat they think the Grammys is just for the important to artists. Now that is essentially why this is a story for me, because BTS sees the Grammys as important, chose to turn it down, and allegedly because they don't want to have a language barrier. But if we learned about what we just learned about with Michael Jackson, it's very possible that they could have swept the Grammys had that new category not been implemented, which then begs the question on, if the Grammys were only important to artists and they swept the Grammys, what would it really have meant if they swept the Grammys and we didn't really care? Like, what was the point of A, separating them to avoid sweeping the category, or B, separating them so that way they can, compete for a Grammy at all? Like, what is the point of the Grammys? And I think until we answer that, like, as long as I have this video, it's not going to be answered in this video, but until we answer that, we're not really going to understand the premise that they're protesting anything, because the idea that you're doing this because of a language barrier, as we saw, is not necessarily true. You guys are selling millions of records and we all love you around the world, so you guys are fine. The other side of it is that, how are you really going to navigate this if you, A, don't get the Grammy you say you value and you just don't want it anymore? And then B, if it's really not valuable to the fans, then what is all this huff and puffing about? That's the main thing we got to answer.
Japanese fans are also known for their loyalty. They don't just follow trends, they collect. That's why K-pop companies invest heavily in merchandise and exclusive content for Japan. Blu-ray sets, fan club memberships, even Japan-only concert tours. It's not just about music, it's about building a personal connection. For labels, Japan is the perfect market. High spending, low controversy, and a deep appreciation for polished performance. Now let's shift to America.
Okay, now let's shift to America. But like he said, in Japan, they have a deep appreciation for personal connection, polished performances, and that high level, I guess you can say, exclusivity, seeing everything become valuable as far as merchandise and things like that. They highly invest in it. Now let's go over to America.
The dream and the battlefield of K-pop's expansion. The US market wasn't easy to crack. For years, Korean acts tried and failed to break through, facing cultural barriers and limited exposure. But then came the YouTube era, and suddenly, global visibility became free. PSY's Gangnam Style shattered language barriers, paving the way for BTS and Blackpink to enter mainstream American media. But here's the secret. K-pop doesn't try to compete with American pop. It collaborates with it. labels began partnering with US giants like Columbia Records, Interscope, and Universal. They knew the path to America wasn't through radio, it was through social media, fandom power, and streaming platforms like Spotify and TikTok. Every teaser, every dance challenge, every fan cam, these became marketing weapons. American fans don't buy 10 physical albums, but they stream songs millions of times, drive hashtags, and flood online polls.
And we are the most train hoppingest, bandwagonist ass community ever. So if something's trendy in your country and you make it look cool, we'll try to make some cool bootleg version of it here to say we part of the team. So being able to do that collaboration aspect is the key thing. And again, this is the part that it confuses me about BTS protests, is that I don't know if that's the angle that they want to enter into, mainstream American pop. Do you guys want to do the collaborative thing where like you're now making American pop as Korean artists, or are you trying to introduce Korean pop to the American palette? And that's the part that I don't know if that's what they're trying to do, which would bring a lot of clarity to my questions here.
That engagement is monetized through YouTube views, ad revenue, and brand deals. K-pop's US strategy is all about visibility and prestige. Once an idol group performs on shows like The Tonight Show or Coachella, they gain cultural legitimacy. That opens doors for high-end brand endorsements. Luxury fashion houses like Dior, Celine, and Chanel race to sign idols as global ambassadors. It's no longer just about selling albums, it's about selling image. The American market turns K-pop stars into global luxury icons, each deal worth millions. Now let's talk about China, the most complicated yet lucrative market of them all. In the early 2000s, China was K-pop's biggest gold rush. Korean dramas, cosmetics, and music flooded the mainland, creating an entire generation of fans obsessed with Hallyu. The Korean wave groups like EXO, Super Junior, and FX gained huge followings, and idol companies earned millions from Chinese fan bases that could crash websites with a single pre-order. But political tensions soon changed everything. The 2017 THAAD dispute led to restrictions on Korean entertainment, forcing agencies to rethink their strategy. Instead of abandoning China, they adapted. Companies started building Chinese subunits, recruiting Chinese idols, and licensing content through local streaming platforms like Weibo, QQ Music, and iQIYI. These partnerships allowed Korean labels to earn indirectly while avoiding direct bans. At the same time, Chinese idols became bridges between both worlds. Names like Lei Zhang, Jackson Wang, and Lucas helped sustain fan interest even when official promotions were halted. For K-pop, China remains risky but impossible to ignore. It's too big, too fast-growing, and too passionate to walk away from. When you look at all three markets together, a pattern emerges. K-pop isn't just selling music, it's selling identity. In Japan, it's intimacy and collection. In America, it's influence and aspiration.
And so this is an amazing video for breaking this down. Great job, whoever made this. This actually proves a lot of what we know to be true about the music industry, and that you guys are appreciative of being able to relate to a lot of the artists. But it also proves that how the relationship between the technology companies and musicians is even tighter than it has ever been, because even avoiding the bans was banking on their ability to access social media websites. It had nothing to do with their musical skills. You guys weren't looking for them. So just like I said, keep this in mind. So now BTS is going to be probably mentioned in the coming portion of this video, but just keep in mind all the things that they're navigating to where now they get into the American market and they have to now think about the palette change as well.
In China, it's prestige and exclusivity. Each country is monetized differently, but they all serve one goal: to make Korean pop culture the world's default entertainment. Behind the scenes, this global machine runs with near military precision. Every album rollout is synchronized across time zones. Every teaser is optimized for maximum social engagement. Agencies employ data analytics teams that track which hashtags trend in which countries, adjusting marketing in real time.
And do you see how these strategies this is how we have jobs in the music industry essentially. But you guys who are in AI and tech and all this stuff, this is how you can keep the music industry, as an option for employment and stuff like that. If you want to, latch onto a really, really good band or group, or a growing band or group. But these strategies that these guys are implementing, I think, in my personal opinion, the average fan thinks are not happening. Like, you think that you just organically ran across the TikTok of the latest new song, or that new girl who's really cute on stage, she just happened to be cute. It's like, no, she probably planned a lot of the things that you're looking at. And so considering that, when we are looking to get Grammys and things like that, the planning and the strategizing can actually hinder you if a lot of people feel the plan, if they don't feel immersed, but it doesn't feel like it's actually organic. But then on the other hand, I can't say that, because the organic impact that Michael Jackson had on everybody, though it had planning, was punished by the Grammys. So I'm not really sure what to really believe here, other than, if you want to be successful, a lot of the planning that is here can either be punished or rewarded depending on the market in which you want an award from.
This isn't chaos. It's choreography on a corporate scale. The financial results speak for themselves.
Also, as a musician, this also explains how many more positions you need to fill to be successful today. Like, I'm a solo musician, and I can see like already a gajillion different areas I need assistance in. But like most CEOs and people who are hiring managers and stuff, it's hard to find people that really, really, really want to work for the thing that you are doing, not just because it's convenient or comfortable or fun, right? So having a data analyst on your team is cool, but you generally have that in AI. It's just, you want to be able to bridge that learning gap between knowing what your data is saying and be able to strategize with the data. AI can't do that for you. So finding people that want to work with you in these types of ways is going to be helpful, especially if you want to plan like merchandise and stuff. Like, I've been planning merch and like shows and building a website and stuff like that. As far as there being people out there willing to help, that's one thing. But having people willing to work, completely different conversation. Everybody wants to say, yeah, I can help you out, I support you, I think you're going to do good. But then when it's time to clock in, make some sacrifice, most people aren't doing it, and everybody switched they are.
In 2024, HYBE's revenue exceeded $1.5 billion, with nearly 70% coming from overseas markets. SM, JYP, and YG reported similar global growth concert tours across North America and Europe routinely sell out in minutes, with average ticket prices rivaling Western pop stars. K-pop isn't just Korea's pride, it's a national export, contributing billions to the country's GDP every year.
And that's why it's kind of a gamble for BTS to be boycotting anything right now.
Here's the twist. This global domination comes with its own trade-offs. As agencies chase worldwide markets, idols are under enormous pressure to appeal to everyone. That means safer lyrics, polished English interviews, and neutral public images. It's mass appeal over personal expression.
Mass appeal over personal expression. You're starting to see my point here, right? If you want a Grammy, there's a bit of a dance the monkey has to do, right? So why do you want a Grammy? Why don't you want a Grammy? What makes you think Grammys are worth less if everybody wants one? So a lot of this is going to be the biggest part that artists are going to have to navigate. And it's really, really, really tough, because you're going to go into the music industry with your mind made up about what you may want or may want to change. But then you're going to get hit with reality. So hopefully BTS comes out of this, with no backlash or anything like that. But the point here is that now that we understand what the Grammys really is and what's really going on, let's make better decisions as musicians. But this is Musician Talks with DameSmiff, and we went over whether or not the Grammys is racist against Asians right now. And it's looking like it may be the case, but they have a consistency to just generally be racist with everybody. So I will see you guys in the next episode. Be sure to subscribe so you can catch all my videos.